A cordial greeting to all the people who connect with us in the course of self-knowledge. We will be discussing lecture number 13 called Laws of Karma and Dharma. The purpose of addressing this topic is for us to understand in particular what karma is, what dharma is, and what these two laws are. We will talk about what can generate karma and what can generate dharma, how one learns from these laws, which is one of the most important aspects of this lecture, who governs them, and we will also address the topic of the tribunal of objective justice, how karma can be negotiated and how it is possible to transcend it. So welcome everyone to this space of self-knowledge where we will delve deeper into the laws of karma and dharma. To begin, we will carefully examine what karma truly is. Karma is considered to be one of the 48 fundamental laws that govern this physical plane. This law is also commonly known as the law of equalization. It is also sometimes referred to as the law of he who kills with the sword dies with the sword. What this law causes is that all the bad things we do to other people or even to ourselves, whether through our actions, words, or thoughts, will eventually come back to us in some way. Generally, karma returns to us with pain, with suffering, and with misfortunes, reminding us of the consequences of our behavior. But in fact, since this law is also known as the law of compensation, if we do the right things, help others, assist people in their process of spiritual evolution, this will also in the end come back to us. In this case, what we receive in return is dharma or benefits, or we could also call them divine rewards. So that's why we will be talking about this law, which is in particular like the law of balance. There is in fact something called objective justice, which will measure each of the things we do. I'll tell you in advance that what can generate karma or what can generate dharma are words, actions, or omissions. In other words, directly our own deeds. We won't be held accountable, so to speak, for what we think. We won't be held accountable for what we feel. But what's important to know is that each of our actions is influenced by what we think or feel. That's why one of the keys is that if we start to self-observe, we will realize the thoughts and emotions that influence our actions. If I have a thought of adultery and an emotion that makes me feel in love with someone who is not my partner, if I don't eliminate those thoughts and emotions, it's very likely that this will lead me to commit a karmic act. In the same way, if I am thinking about helping others and I have the desire to share this knowledge with other people, it's very likely that this thought will later turn into actions and generate something we will call dharma. Something that we should reflect and analyze is that karma many times is not charged to us immediately. There are times when karma takes a little while. There is a phrase that says, "There is no debt that is not paid and no deadline that is not fulfilled." For example, we might at some point make a mistake during our teenage years. Let's suppose that at that particular stage, we made a girlfriend feel really bad. We betrayed her in some way. And with that, we accumulate karma. Then, years later, maybe 5, 6, or even 10 years down the line, we fall deeply, truly in love with someone, and that person in turn makes us suffer, just as we once made someone else suffer in the past. Many people often doubt the process of karma because in fact it is not always experienced or collected immediately, but sooner or later it always arrives. Something we need to understand is that when we begin the process of awakening consciousness, since the purpose of the law is to learn, karma often starts to be collected more quickly. We often make a mistake and immediately illnesses, misfortunes, and other consequences appear. This helps us reflect on our wrongdoings and gives us the opportunity to start correcting them. Well, one thing we must understand is that this course of self-knowledge has its foundation in the law of karma. What it means is that the greatest amount of wisdom that we are going to gain is through this law. To truly learn from karma, we have to carefully reflect and thoughtfully consider what is being returned to us and why. If, for example, I was robbed, which is a form of karma, suffering a theft, that will allow me to reflect deeply. When have I done the same thing myself? When I gain the wisdom from the thief within me, I will learn. If, for example, someone speaks badly about me at work and I have work-related problems with a certain person, that will allow me, if I study the process of karma carefully, to analyze and reflect on my own bad behaviors. Here is a small formula that we are going to study right now about how we can, for instance, learn from karma. One could reflect, well, when have I done the same thing? If, for example, people are speaking badly about me at work, when have I done the same thing? Maybe not about the person who is speaking badly about me, but when have I spoken badly about someone else? If I start to reflect on this, I will begin to look back at times in my past when I have spoken badly about my partner, my boss, my coworkers, and that will allow me to remember that I have made the same mistake. And by reflecting on that mistake, I can eliminate that psychological defect because I am experiencing a consequence of something I did in the past. And once I have reflected on that, I can come to forgive the other person, generate Dharma, which I will explain to you in a moment how Dharma is generated in order to resolve that conflict. If we do the same thing when we get sick, when we are betrayed by someone, or when, for example, a business deal doesn't go as we expected and we end up losing money, then we can apply this formula, these 4 important steps to begin the process of learning. Remember that the foundation of all these teachings is the law of karma. Karma is cause and effect. Dharma, its counterpart, is the path of balance and justice. We have already studied that karma is the debt we acquire when we harm others or ourselves, but now we are going to explain a little about what Dharma is. Dharma is like a cosmic currency, a kind of spiritual wealth that each of us gradually earns by helping other people or by helping ourselves, especially in the ongoing process of awakening our consciousness. This valuable Dharma slowly accumulates over the course of the 108 lifetimes that we have lived as human beings, building up over time, lifetime after lifetime. Karma, on the other hand, is accumulated from the last 7 lifetimes. That is why we are often made to pay for things from past lives. But Dharma is accumulated from everything, absolutely everything, from all the times we have lived as humans. And this is very important because we are going to need this Dharma in order to achieve self-realization. Thanks to it, we will have the possibility of finding a good partner to advance in the awakening of consciousness, and we will also have access to this knowledge. Dharma will be set in motion so that we can receive help in our meditation practices and astral projection. It will also act to allow us to pay off the karma accumulated by our defects and bad actions. There are 2 ways to acquire dharma. One is through charity and the other is through conscious works. Charity means helping other people selflessly without expecting anything in return. We give them food, we give them shelter, we give them a roof. We help people, but true charity must always be done without expecting anything in return. Simply because it genuinely comes from the heart, we could say that acts of charity, in fact, generate a large part of Dharma. However, conscious works are also absolutely fundamental. These are actions in which we dedicate our valuable time to teaching spiritual knowledge to others. Those conscious works, such as the fact that today I am giving this lecture, constitute a conscious action, and these conscious works are highly valued and rewarded by the divine law. The reason is that every conscious work done in pursuit of awakening consciousness tends to be transcendental. If we teach someone how to awaken their consciousness and this person achieves self-realization, attains the liberation of their consciousness, we will be given a super reward. And since we have to pay so much karma, the karma from the last 7 existences, one recommendation is that we start to especially focus on performing conscious works. This does not mean that we shouldn't practice charity, of course we should, but we must focus on generating large amounts of Dharma through the work of sacrifice for humanity. Now then, who is in charge of administering this process of karma? Let's study a bit about the Tribunal of Objective Justice. The Tribunal of Objective Justice is an entity of divine law responsible for administering all the good and all the bad things we do. There is a hierarch who is the great hierarch of karma, known as Master Anubis, whom you can see here. He is this figure with the face of a jackal. And in addition to that, we will find some judges. If you look here at the illustration, you can see some white judges and some black judges. The white judges are the ones who administer Dharma, which refers to the good things that we do. And on the other hand, the other judges would be the black judges, who are the ones that administer karma. They are essentially the prosecutors in this context. So every time a karma is going to be collected from us, as you can see in this small illustration, there are judges or laws that defend us, and there are also laws that judge or punish us. And this is how verdicts begin to be given there in that Tribunal of Objective Justice. The Tribunal of Objective Justice is found within ourselves, in the 5th dimension, specifically in our own sexual center. It is there, in that tribunal, where the karma corresponding to each of the psychological defects we are eliminating is paid or negotiated precisely as required. It is there where the Divine Mother commits with the Master Anubis to perform certain sacrificial works for humanity in order to eliminate each of these defects. If we do not have enough Dharma available to pay off the karmic debts that arise from our defects, then our progress in the ongoing process of psychological death will inevitably begin to be hindered. That is why it is so important to carry out the work of sacrifice for humanity and generate Dharma. Now we are going to talk a little about the different types of karma, because you will soon realize that there are different forms of suffering. First type of karma is individual karma. We earn this individual karma when we as individuals make errors or mistakes that in particular especially affect ourselves, impacting our own lives directly. For example, there are karmas that are specifically related to visual difficulties or to issues such as obesity. There are people whose families genetically tend to be thin, but they themselves still suffer from obesity. That clearly indicates it is an individual karma. Generally, these types of karmas are generated when we have made mistakes that have directly affected ourselves. There is another type of karma, which is family karma, where a group of people who share the same karmic debt are brought together. For example, if a person has karma related to alcoholism, they may be placed in a family where that problem exists. Several people with that karma are brought together in a family with alcohol problems. The father comes home drunk. The mother might also use drugs, and life in that household becomes a real hell. It can also happen that people with karma related to witchcraft are brought together and placed in an environment where certain illnesses exist, such as intellectual disability, Down syndrome, or epilepsy. In these cases, the people gathered in that place are paying off a family karma. The entire family shares the same debt. Another type of karma is collective karma. In this case, A group of people who owe the same karma are brought together, and once gathered, their karma is immediately collected. Karma, for example, could be a car accident. Yeah, let's suppose that certain people had karma from having committed murders and they died together in an accident. In that case, the divine law has brought them together to settle a collective karma. There are also other types of karma on a larger scale, such as national karma, in which a large number of people with the same karmic debt are grouped together. This karma is settled at the level of an entire country, affecting a much broader population. For example, karmas of tyranny, karmas of corruption, or karmas at the climatic level in that region of the planet. For instance, what happened recently on an island. Practically 80% of the island burned, and all its inhabitants, many died, and the others had to be displaced because everything was destroyed. That would be an example of what we call national karma. There is also global karma, which is what we recently experienced when all of humanity was made to pay a karmic debt, as happened with pandemics, especially with the COVID-19 process. And finally, there is planetary karma, where the planet itself exacts payment from all species and all beings that inhabit it. For example, global warming, the melting of the polar ice caps, the entire climate process that is happening is part of planetary karma. There are other types of karma that concern us more directly, which will be the focus of our work on awakening consciousness. There is another type of karma known as the famous saya karma. This type of karma causes us to have to share karma with each person with whom we form a sexual connection. Over a long period of time, for example, if we form a deep and meaningful sexual bond with someone who is currently going through a difficult financial crisis, we may end up absorbing a significant part of that person's karma. And within this complex sexual karma, people with whom we have established sexual ties in our past lives can, in fact, reappear in our future lives to demand from us and drag us into repeating the same actions over and over again. This is how, for example, the recurrences of the well-known adulteries happen, and how persistent and troubling obsessions can gradually arise as a direct result of that particular sexual karma. Every time we unite sexually with someone, we absorb more and more karma from that person. Remember that during sexual union, we become a single energy, a single substance. At the moment of fornication, the energies mix, and the subtle bodies of both also combine. There is also, in fact, another type of karma, karma yoga. This type of karma is experienced by people who suffer from loneliness or who have great difficulty finding a partner. They may be nice or attractive, but it is, in fact, very difficult for them to find and establish a stable relationship in their lives. And when they begin the work of awakening consciousness, it also becomes difficult for them to find a partner who wants to go through the awakening process. Karma yoga is generated by not valuing our partner, by not valuing the process of the opposite sex, and it is also very closely linked to saya karma. Also, when we have been adulterous, we could in fact end up acquiring this karma yoga. There is another type of karma which is known as hard karma. Hard karma is karma that we earn by wasting our creative sexual energy. Hard karma consists of illnesses that can only be paid for with pain. We find, for example, different types of cancer, the well-known sciatica, very painful diseases, and even AIDS. All of these are part of what is called hard karma, which usually originates from having spilled our own seed. Something fundamental that we must understand about hard karma is that it cannot be negotiated. The spilling of sexual energy is considered by divine law one of the most serious offenses we can commit. For this reason, we are not allowed to negotiate this type of karma. We must pay for it through illnesses. And finally, we are going to talk about katansya karma. Katansya karma is the karma of the gods. This type of karma is acquired by those who have managed to awaken their consciousness and who, out of love for humanity, decide to act to help the collective awakening, even if that means taking on some karma as a consequence. They do this by moving in one way or another certain pieces to facilitate that spiritual awakening in others. Let's take an example. For instance, Master Jesus successfully negotiated an additional 2,000 years for this planet so that we would truly have the opportunity to awaken our consciousness. In those 2,000 years, there have been some beings who have achieved self-realization, who have managed to fully awaken their consciousness. But also in those 2,000 years, there have been world wars, there have been murders, there have been many acts of depravity, and all that pain has to be paid for by this master as a result of carrying out a conscious work. That is why there are gods who generate karma in order to help humanity, or who earn karma by helping humanity through their actions and compassion. Now, to wrap up this brief talk about the laws of karma and dharma, let's take a moment to carefully analyze and study the different ways in which karma can be paid. There are several ways to negotiate karma, but these methods can only truly be used by people who are genuinely interested in awakening their consciousness. Those who are not interested in awakening their consciousness are still in the process of maturing, and karma will, in time, make them mature. Illnesses and setbacks in fortune will sooner or later create in them the longing and desire to awaken their consciousness. But once we begin the work of awakening consciousness, we will be able to use the law of Dharma to our advantage in order to pay off our various karmic debts. For example, the first way in which we can pay our karmic debts is through dharma or cosmic money. So for instance, we make sacrifices for humanity, we help other people awaken their consciousness, we start giving lectures, we begin handing out flyers, we run virtual campaigns. That generates large amounts of dharma, which is a kind of spiritual merit or energy. And once we have accumulated that dharma, if we want to pay with dharma, we need to learn a specific practice called the transfer of funds, which I will explain to you in a moment, what it consists of, how it works, and why it is important. Once we have successfully generated that dharma, at night we can then carry out the important practice of transferring funds. After this practice, we can begin to perceive how this so-called cosmic money is actually moved, thereby helping us in the ongoing process of settling our karmic debts. That is the very first way in which we can pay our karma, through the transfer of funds and the generation of dharma. The second way, however, is a bit more extreme. It consists of what is known as negotiable pain. If we begin to work on awakening consciousness, Master Anubis, who in dreams is often represented as a lion, hence the connection between the lion and divine law, will start to manifest. Through dreams, he will show us that karma is approaching. It is also possible to dream of police officers as another symbolic way of warning us about impending karmic punishment. And he can tell us that in order to avoid that karma, we can do certain works. Then we, through free will, can decide to do the work that Master Anubis asks us to do. Generally, these are always tasks involving psychological death and sacrifice for humanity, and in some cases they have to do with birth. But if we, through our free will, do not want to do the work that Master Anubis proposes to us at that moment, we do not accept the karma and can choose to pay for it with suffering. Karma is coming, often shown in dreams. Here's an example. Someone in the astral world, in the world of dreams, is told a karma yoga is coming your way in which you will lose your partner. And the master tells them, in order to pay for it, you need to work on these psychological defects and you have to go to a certain place, to a certain city, and open a conference hall to pay off the karma. So if the person doesn't want to, for whatever reason, doesn't feel they have the strength, feels too lazy to do that work, doesn't want to give up their defects, then they choose to pay with pain and the karma comes and they have to live through it. So even though they could actually negotiate it, they simply don't do it. The third way is with pain. Well, that was negotiable pain. There is another one which would be the non-negotiable pain, which is when we have to go through the illnesses of hard karma. When we are struck by very painful illnesses and they tell us, no, This can't be negotiated because it's hard karma. You spilled your sexual energy, and in order to understand the value of your sexual energy, you have to experience this illness. So they will give us illnesses or diseases that can sometimes take many years to fully recover from. But what is good to know is that in some cases with hard karma, they may allow us to postpone it a little, just for a while. In particular, the aim is to postpone that karma until on the second mountain, the Christ comes and pays it with his own works. That is why in some cases there are illnesses that cannot be negotiated because they are part of hard karma. The other way to transform that karma is through charity, as we have already studied. The lion of the law is subdued with charity by helping others selflessly. And finally, there are the negotiations with the law. We are going to use the negotiations with the law, for example, when we make a transfer of funds, we make sacrifices for humanity, and the karma we are experiencing is not resolved. In that case, it means that our Dharma is not enough, and therefore we have to make a negotiation with the law. To carry out negotiations with the law, we are going to explain a practice known as the cross-negotiation practice, which in this context we will explain shortly. To wrap up this brief talk, we are going to explain which specific practices and methods allow us to move money when we want to pay with Dharma, making transactions possible in various situations. In addition, we will also explain another important practice which is commonly known as negotiations with the law. Let's start by talking a little about the practice of transferring funds. Each one of us, deep within ourselves internally, every time we perform a conscious deed or an act of charity, such as helping someone in need or making a selfless choice, starts to earn some special coins that are related to Dharma, which is a concept of moral duty and righteousness. All those coins are then stored together in a special place known as the Dharma Bank. There, each of us has our own treasure chests of money from all 108 existences, all the good things we have done. All that money is there. But there is also, in fact, another place called the Karma Bank. That is where all the karmic debts are, all the bills for the bad things we have done over the last 7 existences. In practice, the transfer of funds consists of taking the money that is in the Dharma Bank and moving it to the Karma Bank to pay off those bills or karmic debts. How is this exercise done? It is done through imagination. First, a small petition is made where the Father is asked and the Divine Mother is asked to please transfer the money from the Dharma Bank to the Karma Bank. And there, we can make the request for this illness to be cancelled, to resolve this financial crisis, to solve the relationship problem, to pay off this social issue that I am dealing with, to have better astral projection, whatever you wish, absolutely anything. Once we have made the request, we are going to imagine that we are a scale. Here is where imagination comes in, and we are going to imagine that we move our arms, as you might see here in the diagram, at a 45-degree angle. And when we move our arms like this, we are going to imagine that on the right side, the little gold coins are transferred. As we lower the left arm, we imagine that the little gold coins drop into the bank of karma. We can imagine, suddenly picture a jar. And after we do this exercise, we make the movement in the opposite direction as if going to the tribunal of Dharma to collect the money, and we return to this balanced position. This balance exercise consists of a movement in which we shift from one side to the other, imagining that we are a scale transferring money from one place to another. We will perform it by focusing on different parts of the body while reciting the following mantras. The mantra Ni, focused on the brow, the mantra Ni on the larynx, the mantra No on the heart, the mantra Nu on the navel, and the mantra Na on the instinctive center. Ready? Alright, now let's go ahead and watch this short video together so it will be easier for us to understand how the movement is done. So we make the request, Father, please move this money from the bank of Dharma to the bank of Karma to pay my most urgent karmic debts. After we make the request, we open our arms and begin. We move the we make the weighing scale movement. There goes one movement pronounced focused here on the brow with the mantra ni. Then the second movement focused on the throat, the mantra ne. Next, as we are now focused on the heart, we pronounce the mantra no, the navel, no. And then concentrated in the instinctive center. This movement should be repeated a total of 9 times. The reason for this is that we are going to pay off the karma that has accumulated from our last 7 different existences. The 8th is so that our hard karma is postponed a bit, and the 9th is to help pay the katansya karma of the gods. Once we have completed this transfer of funds 9 times, we finish by closing with the mantra tortur. The right hand over the left. Ready? This was the practice known as the transfer of funds. The recommendation for this practice is that it can in fact be done every single day as part of your regular routine. Because every day it is absolutely necessary to negotiate karma. Now we are going to carefully study the practice of cross-negotiation. As mentioned earlier, cross-negotiation is a practice that we use when our Dharma is not enough and we need to resolve something immediately. So in order to make that cross-negotiation, we really have to be willing to do something, even if it's just a small step for the process of awakening consciousness, right? So how is the exercise done? Let's take a look at it step by step. The practice is done by lying down in the shape of a cross as shown in the diagram. Then we make the following request. My Father, my Lord, and my God, I beg you, if it is your will, to go to the temple of objective justice. Once there, negotiate with the Venerable Master Anubis and his 42 judges. That is where we can present our request. For example, you might say negotiate with Master Anubis, so that he gives me strength for the work of awakening my consciousness. Once we do this exercise, we get up and repeat the prayer again. My Father, my Lord, and my God, I humbly ask you, if it is your will, to go to the temple of objective justice. Once there, negotiate with the Venerable Master Anubis and his 42 judges, so that he may give me strength for the work of the 3 factors of the awa of the awakening of consciousness. Or whatever it is that you need in order to solve this particular health problem, to address and solve this relationship problem, to overcome this financial problem, or whatever it is you truly wish for. All right? After doing this exercise, we lie down again for the 3rd time and repeat the phrase. Then for the 4th time sitting, we repeat the phrase again. 5th time lying down, we repeat the phrase. 6th time sitting. When we repeat it the last time, we simply say the phrase and give thanks. Father, give infinite thanks to the Venerable Master Anubis and his 42 judges for listening to my supplications. And we close with the Ahom mantra, Afum. The right hand over the left. That mantra means, so be it. If we are going to negotiate something specific, let's use an example. We have a very painful illness and we want it to be taken away. We say the same prayer, but instead of asking for strength, in this case we can say, so that you may take this illness away from me. And right there we can say, and in exchange for you taking this illness away from me, I will commit to giving lectures, to meditating for a certain amount of time, and to doing specific sexual transmutation practices, for example. And then the same prayer is repeated again. Master Anubis and his 42 judges and so on. Until we repeat again, take this illness away from me and in exchange I commit to doing this. Something very important. It is important to remember that when we make these deals with the divine law, in the world of dreams, we will indeed be shown whether the deal was made or not. If the business was achieved, it is important that we begin to fulfill it. If the pact was not made or was not confirmed in the dream world, it is necessary to rethink it, since sometimes what we are offering is not enough to settle the karmic debt we have. All right. Thank you all very much for staying with us up to this point. Remember that you can always follow us on our various social media platforms for more updates and information. As always, the next lecture we will be studying together is about drugs and alcoholism, so we kindly ask you to please be sure to stay tuned for our upcoming broadcast. Now, I wish you all a good afternoon, everyone. See you soon.